The grand hall of the Valoran Empire stretched before Captain James Fletcher like a cathedral carved from living crystal. Bioluminescent veins pulsed through the walls, casting ethereal light across the assembled dignitaries. He stood at attention in his dress uniform, acutely aware that every eye in the chamber belonged to someone who was not human. The delegation from Earth had arrived 3 days prior, the culmination of 18 months of careful negotiation following first contact. James had been chosen as military attaché precisely because of his record: 15 years of service, 3 peacekeeping missions, and not a single diplomatic incident. He was professional, controlled, and entirely unprepared for what was about to happen. Empress Tira sat upon the luminous throne, her 4 arms arranged in a gesture of formal welcome. Her skin shimmered with patterns that James had learned indicated cautious optimism. Beside her, in a smaller seat, perched Princess Tira. The child was no more than 7 cycles old by human estimation, her large amber eyes taking in everything with the unfiltered curiosity of youth. The human ambassador, Director Maria Vasquez, was midway through her prepared remarks about mutual cooperation and shared prosperity when the princess suddenly stood. Her movement was slight, but in the rigid formality of the Valoran court, it might as well have been a thunderclap. "Mom," the small voice carried across the silent hall with crystalline clarity. "That's him." The entire palace fell into astonished silence. James felt his heart rate spike. Protocol dictated he remain motionless, but his training also demanded situational awareness. He had no idea what was happening, but centuries of human evolution screamed that being singled out in an alien throne room was rarely positive. Empress Tira's skin rippled through 7 different color patterns in rapid succession, an emotional display that James's briefing materials had not covered. She leaned toward her daughter, speaking in the low-frequency range that humans could barely perceive. The princess pulled away from her mother's reaching hand and descended the 3 steps from the throne platform. Her small feet made no sound on the crystalline floor. She walked directly toward the human delegation, her path unwavering. Ambassador Vasquez glanced at James, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes asking 1,000 questions he could not answer. The Valoran guards shifted, hands moving toward weapons that humans had never seen deployed. Princess Tira stopped precisely 3 feet from James and looked up at him. This close, he could see that her amber eyes held depths of intelligence that seemed far older than her small frame. "Suggested. You saved me," she said simply. James's mind raced through every moment since entering Valoran space. He had never met this child. He had never been to this world before this diplomatic mission. He had certainly never saved anyone here. "Your Highness," he said carefully, "I believe there has been some mistake. This is my first visit to your beautiful world." "Not here," Tira replied. Her small hand reached out and touched the metal cluster on his chest. Her fingers found one in particular, a bronze star with a blue ribbon. There, on the station. The room seemed to tilt. 18 months ago, James had been assigned to a joint patrol near the disputed border zone. There had been an incident at a civilian mining station. Pirates, or perhaps just desperate refugees. No one had ever been entirely sure. 3 ships, outgunned and surrounded. His commander had ordered them to hold position, wait for reinforcements. James had disobeyed. He had taken his small patrol craft into the station's docking bay, evacuated 47 civilians, and held off the attackers long enough for the station's emergency protocols to seal the breach. The Bronze Star had been awarded quietly, with a reprimand in his file for insubordination stapled right behind the commendation. "The merchant vessel," James whispered, the pieces falling into place. "You were on the merchant vessel." "My aunt was conducting trade negotiations," Tira confirmed. She brought me to show me how different species cooperate. Then the bad people came. Empress Tira had risen from her throne now, descending to stand beside her daughter. Up close, the ruler of the Valoran Empire was impossibly tall, but her expression held something James recognized from every mother he had ever known: protective love mixed with dawning comprehension. "Explain," the Empress commanded, but her voice was gentle. James swallowed. 18 months ago, there was an incident at the Frontier Station 7. I was part of a patrol unit. We evacuated civilians from a merchant ship under attack. Standard rescue protocol. He carried me, Nira interrupted, looking up at her mother. The ship was shaking, and the lights were gone, and Aunt Vessa was hurt. This human came through the dark with a light on his head. He picked me up and told me we were going on an adventure. He made it not scary. The princess turned back to James. "You sang to me." James felt heat rise to his face. He had sung to her. Some half-remembered lullaby his own mother had sung, modified on the fly because he had no idea if a young alien would find it comforting or terrifying. The child had been shaking, her skin flickering through what he now recognized as fear patterns. "I didn't know who you were," James admitted. In the confusion, the emergency, there were no translators working properly. "I just knew there was a child who needed help." "You risked your life," Empress Tira said. "It was not a question. I was doing my job," James replied. "Your commanding officer ordered you to wait for reinforcements," the Empress continued. "We have access to many records, Captain Fletcher. We know you disobeyed to save those civilians. We know you were nearly killed when their ship's reactor destabilized. We know you held the docking collar together manually while the last evacuees transferred." She paused, her skin shifting to a color that the briefing materials had identified as deep respect. "We did not know it was you who carried my daughter to safety." The implication hung in the air. The Valoran Empire had been negotiating with Earth for over a year. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, mutual defense pacts. All of it had proceeded with the cautious formality of species who did not yet fully trust each other. And now this Ambassador Vasquez stepped forward carefully. "Your Majesty, I assure you that Captain Fletcher's actions represent the highest ideals of humanity. We are honored that he could serve in such a capacity, though I confess we were unaware of the full significance." "Unaware," Empress Tira repeated. She looked at James again. "Captain, why did you not report that a Valoran princess was among those you rescued?" "I didn't know," James said honestly. "The chaos, the failing systems, I was focused on getting people out. I logged 47 evacuees. I didn't know their names, their positions, their species' social structures. I just knew they needed help." Nira tugged on her mother's lower left arm. "That's what I've been trying to tell you about humans, Mom. They help because they can, not because they're supposed to." From the mouth of a child, it sounded so simple. But James could see the impact ripple through the Valoran court. The assembled nobles, generals, and advisors all reacted in their own ways. Skin patterns shifted. Postures changed. The calculation in their eyes transformed into something else. That Empress Tira knelt, bringing herself to her daughter's level. "You are certain this is him?" "I would know him anywhere," Nira said firmly. "He has kind eyes, and he smells like determination." James had no idea what determination smelled like to a Valoran, but he remained silent. The Empress rose and extended all 4 of her arms in a gesture that caused gasps throughout the chamber. The Valoran briefing materials had been very clear. The 4-armed embrace was reserved for family and the closest of allies. "Captain James Fletcher," Empress Tira announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the grand hall. "You have saved the heir to the Valoran throne. You asked for no reward. You expected no recognition. You acted with honor when no one was watching, which is the truest measure of character. She paused, letting the words sink in. The Valoran Empire does not forget its debts. Neither do we ignore the implications of your actions. A human saw a child in danger and did not calculate the political benefit, did not weigh the risk against potential gain. Simply acted. Empress Tira's skin shifted to a brilliant gold that James's materials had not covered at all. Around the room, the assembled Valorans responded in kind, their bodies becoming a sea of golden light. "This is the species we choose to stand beside," the Empress declared. "Not because of treaties written on documents, but because of deeds written in courage. The Valoran Empire and humanity will be allies not just in trade and defense, but in spirit and purpose." She turned to Ambassador Vasquez. "Let us begin our negotiations again, but this time as friends who have already bled for each other." Princess Nira, apparently satisfied that the adults were handling things properly, smiled up at James. "Can I still call you Captain Adventure?" she asked quietly. James, feeling the weight of two species' futures somehow resting on his shoulders, knelt down to her level. "You can call me James," he said. "And if it's all right with your mother, maybe I could teach you that song properly." The princess's squeal of delight was, thankfully, universal across all species. Later, after the formal proceedings had dissolved into something far more genuine, after Ambassador Vasquez had given him a look that promised both a commendation and an extremely long debriefing, James found himself on a balcony overlooking the Valoran capital. The city stretched out below him, alien and beautiful, glowing with bioluminescent technology that humanity was still decades from understanding. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Treaties to finalize, cultural exchanges to plan, a future to build. But tonight, James Fletcher allowed himself a moment to process what had happened. He had disobeyed orders to save strangers. One of those strangers had been a princess. That princess had recognized him in a moment of formal diplomacy and changed the course of history, would join the galactic community, not because they were the strongest, or the smartest, or the most advanced. They would join because one soldier had carried a frightened child through the dark and sung her a lullaby. Sometimes, James reflected, the smallest acts of kindness casted the longest shadows. Behind him, through the crystal walls, he could hear Nira's laughter as she tried to teach the human delegation a Valoran children's game. The future, it seemed, would be built not in grand gestures, but in these small moments of connection. And that, James thought, was exactly as it should be.